All right, so today let's talk about what we're going to talk about. Oh yeah, at risk of this becoming a theme, we're going to talk about things you can do, because right now I recognize there are a lot of people who are just kind of looking at the world situation, whether it's here in the US or frankly most of the world, and feeling immensely powerless. Like, as though everything going on around us is beyond our control and beyond our ability to have any influence over. That is a staggering color. So very bright lime scent to it with the smokiness of the sotol in the background. Really enjoy the way that looks. That is delightfully smooth. I really did not expect that to, I expected that to be way harsher than it is, because the lime juice is pretty bright, that sotol is pretty harsh. Absinthe is tough. But put all these together, especially with that honey basil simple syrup, and there's just all kinds of really complex sweetness going on in here, and with a very soft background hint of a sort of like herbaceous smokiness to it, but that's really subtle and very much on the back. That turned out really well. So I have three things here that I think are, what is that? Oh, there we go. I have three things that I think will be really helpful for us that we can do as photographers to give us some control back over everything that's going on. And the first one, we'll talk about them in detail, but the three of them are: find a group to volunteer for or otherwise support. 2 is work to take photos that have a meaning, that say something about life and people. And 3 is work to make sure that your photos are not just what everyone else is doing and that they are different from the mainstream, okay? So let's go over those in order. First one is find a group to volunteer or otherwise support. If you don't have time to volunteer but do have some money, you can find a group that has a mission that you support, and something like Charity Navigator, Charity Star. There's a couple of really good online resources to help you evaluate whether or not a charity is effectively using money to support its mission, or if it's like some of the major national or international charities that have a whole lot of overhead where a big chunk of the money ends up just going to people who work for the charity and not directly supporting those in need. So that's one way. Finding a group to volunteer for, we're photographers. There are photography groups in probably every major city in the country, in whatever country you are in. But in basically every major city, there's a photography group. Join it. Contribute through the act of learning or helping other people in the group, or teaching other people in the group what you know. If you feel confident talking to people and teaching, volunteer to teach. Volunteer to help evaluate. There's like here in Denver, there's this place, Colorado Photographic Arts Center, CPAC. And so we were there the other day, and they had a couple of shows, exhibits going on. And someone's got to judge that sort of stuff. So invest your time in a group like that, where you can meet people in real life, where you can talk to people with whom you have a shared interest and contribute to a community that is there in person. Work to take photos that have a meaning and that say something about life and people. Landscape photos are nice. You see a lot of them on this channel. You really do. Way more than anybody has ever asked for, quite frankly. And landscape photos can have a meaning. They can show the way the world is for people who aren't yet alive, who might not be able to recognize the world we live in today from the world they live in. Just reading the news today, the climate change forecasts are grim and looking grimmer. And that means that a lot of what you and I likely grew up taking for granted with the world is simply not going to be there for people in the future. So there is a value to the landscape photography which shows what the world is like, so that people in the future, if there is an ability for them to rebuild toward something, have that as a frame of reference. And the same thing with city photography, industrial photography, basically creating a record of what life in this time period is like. But more important than that, I believe, is taking photos of the way that people live today. And if we think about many of the most powerful photos over the life of the photographic, since photography was created. But I think the greatest individual images are those that were created of people. And if we think about Dorothea Lange, I think it was, who took the photo of the woman with the two kids sitting in front of her tent during the Dust Bowl. Photos like that resonate, even closing in on a century later, are very often of people. So if you want to create work that has a meaning and that tells a story about the way life is today, a really good way to do that is to focus your camera on human subjects, okay? And that could just be people at home. There are lots of good stories you can tell photographically at a house, but you can also get out and photograph people in the real world as well. Comply with the local laws of your jurisdiction, whether or not it's legal to take photos of people in public with or without their knowledge, for instance. But yeah, that's a really good way to do that. And the last one I came up with for this is work to take photos that are different from the mainstream. And what I mean by that is, do you remember a few years ago there was the Instagram cliche of the girl who's had her arm behind her and the photographer was taking a photo holding her hand, and those photos were awful. Okay. Or the way that, if you look at, again, we'll go to Instagram. I'm going to harp on Instagram for this because Instagram is like the purveyor of mainstream boring crud. And if you look at the photos on there, you'll see that there's just so much stuff that is alike, to the point that even an interesting image becomes a cliche and boring. To that end, if you're going to look at what's going on with the modern contemporary photographic scene, it's important to do so with an eye for, how can I avoid this? Because you want to. You want to find images that are structured differently than what everyone else is doing. You want to make work that tells a story with a different approach to your subject than what everyone else uses. You can photograph the exact same person or subject or scene as a dozen other photographers, and if they all take the same photo but you take something different, people will get more from your work. So look at what other people are doing only insofar as to ask two questions. How can I avoid that if lots of people are doing it? And what is being done right in that image if it really speaks well to you? And when you know what other people are doing a lot of, so you can avoid it, and what speaks to you in images, so that you know what it is that triggers you emotionally when you see a photo, then you can figure out how to create images that have a similar or better effect in a different way. And that's going to set your work apart from what other people are doing, and it will help invest you in creating work that is valuable. Because as we go into whatever future awaits us, creating work that is valuable and honest is going to be highly, highly important. So those are a few things I'm hoping that if you are looking at the world and feeling concerned about it, will give you agency to be more involved. So anyway, let's make this cocktail and see how it goes. Variations. We are again going to be using the coupe glass for this. So first up is 9 parts, which for us is going to be 1.5 ounces of sotol. This is a Mexican sotol. This is a Texan sotol. At least in the case of this one, limited data points here, I'm not a sotol expert. The Texan one is way harsher and smokier. The Mexican one is way smoother. Honestly, kind of in the mood for a smooth drink, but I'm going to go with the Texan one because I have a whole lot more of it, and I think it'll be balanced out by the rest of the ingredients in here. The Mexican one that I had there is really good just to have like a shot glass of it and sip it in the evening for an hour. So 1.5 ounces. Another thing about this sotol is I think this one was brandy cask finished, if I remember correctly. So whereas the Mexican sotol is clear, this one is golden and amber, which will also work very well for this drink. Next up is 3/4 of an ounce of fresh lime juice. And I forgot to peel the garnish off of this before I cut it. We're gonna garnish this just with a little peel of lime. And basically, it'll give us just a little bit of lime flavor, but more importantly, it's a stirrer if we need it. Anyway, so I'm not gonna eyeball this. I'm actually gonna measure it. No, I'm not. I don't have a 3/4 ounce measure, so I'm gonna eyeball this. If not exactly 3/4 of an ounce, it's close enough. 3/4 of an ounce of this is a specialty ingredient, honey basil simple syrup. It's a 1-to-1 mix of honey and water, boiled, and then as it cooled down, I put basil in for a couple of minutes, just enough to extract the flavor of it. And so you get the sweetness of the honey, and that might be closer to an ounce, but that's not the end of the world. Why did I get the, oh yeah, I was originally gonna make something else with tequila and sotol, don't need that. Okay. Honey basil simple, really delightful sweetness there. 1/2 ounce of dry curacao. And lastly, 1 teaspoon of absinthe. That one is very important to get correct because this is a strong spirit, to say the least. Okay, we're gonna shake this up over ice and strain it. Smells really nice. The sotol gives it, this sotol gives it a very smoky flavor. If you've never had sotol, but if you're familiar with tequila and mezcal, sotol's a different plant, but in terms of flavor, it tastes sort of like halfway between tequila and mezcal. This one's a little bit more towards the mezcal type taste in terms of smokiness, but it's got a lot more tequila-like sweetness to it. Oh, look at that. That is a staggering color. I've not made this with this other sotol before, so this is a first for that.